I just returned from San Francisco at the Learning the Brain conference, and my head is buzzing. I talked to neuroscientists, publishers, teachers, principals, superintendents, AI founder people, and it was a fascinating conference. My head is spinning with the things I've learned, but also I feel humbled that I had a chance to really speak into the cognition crisis that I see happening. Is that students are too quick to push the button, and when they push the button, the easy button, if you will, they're destroying their cognition. And so that's the kind of the focus of my talk is, and I talk about a particular student, Sam, who didn't push the button and how that's changed his perspective. I close the keynote with that, and so I encourage you to listen in. I know it's an hour-long keynote, but I encourage you to listen in. Let's go out and reach every student.
Get ready to get stupefied by our keynote speaker. So everyone please put your warm hands together for John Bergmann.
I think we went into education oftentimes. You see, there's a joy, there's a moment in education when you're helping that student. And as you're helping that student, they're struggling with a particular concept. And then they have that aha moment. You guys remember those aha moments? That student is struggling and struggling with a thesis statement. They're struggling with a math problem. But in the last couple of years, have you noticed that the aha moments have diminished? Struggling with a math problem. The students push a button. I got the answer. Struggling with a thesis statement. Button. Didn't read the book. Button. I believe we are at a crossroads in the world of education, and our students are losing their cognition because they are so quick to push the button. So I want to talk about that. And I want to introduce myself briefly. I'm John Bergmann, and I'm a teacher. Okay, this is me with my kids. Okay, I'm a teacher in Houston at Houston Christian High School in Houston, Texas. And a couple of years ago, my principal came to me and he said, John, this AI thing looks like it's going to be a big deal. Can you figure it out for our school and help us learn about it? And so this was the spring of a couple of years ago, and I said, all right. So I got all the books. I signed up for all the LLMs. I did research, and I got all in. I said, this is going to be super awesome. I'm going to jump in with both feet, and it's going to be the most awesome thing. We got a cool tool, and I thought this is all going to be awesome. And let me tell you what happened. It was an abject, total 100% failure. I got the worst reviews in my entire career, and I thought, what's wrong? What just happened? I'm going to talk more about my failure and what I learned out of that failure in a few minutes, but I want to give you a quick backdrop. I've had a very weird career. I started teaching in 1986 at Baker Middle School. Yeah, that's me with the big hair. Yeah, and the beard. Yeah. And then you can see pictures of John throughout his career. I kind of got fat. Yeah. Then I got skinny again. And then you can see I teach science, by the way. And then in 2003, I won a cool award. I had a chance to go to the White House. I won the Presidential Award for Excellence in Math and Science Teaching. There I am in front of Mrs. Bush. There, you can kind of see me there. Yeah. And then I moved to the mountains of Colorado. So I was teaching in Denver, Colorado. And then I moved to the mountains of Colorado. And then in the mountains of Colorado, I taught next to a guy named Aaron Sams. And we helped develop the flipped classroom model. Let's watch this quick video.
The staffers at Woodland Park High School are getting attention worldwide for not giving out homework. Instead, the students watch recorded lectures at home and then do the corresponding homework during their regular class time. 11 News reporter Rosie Barisi is live tonight in Woodland Park. And Rosie, how do the students like it?
Well, Don, they love it, according to teachers and educators from as far as Japan have been calling the school asking where they came up with this brilliant idea. Two teachers at the school say they stumbled on it on accident.
Those are mole-to-mole ratios.
The only homework these Woodland Park High School students ever really get is to watch TV.
Kids learn with a screen. I'm an old guy. I I like a book. I read a book this weekend. It was like with paper, you know, but these kids, they read with things like, you know, they look at screens.
Jonathan Bergmann and Aaron Sams decided it would be a good idea to record their lectures live.
We discovered this software.
It was intended for students who couldn't make it to class.
Wow, this is an amazing teaching tool.
And that's when their wheels started turning.
What if we did that all the time?
And now they do.
Instead of sitting and wasting 45 minutes listening to a teacher yap, they're going to have more time to work one-on-one with the teacher, work through problems, do a lot more hands-on activities, a lot more lab activities.
Allowing students to do the brunt of their work in class has worked wonders for their students.
They used to go home and they would get stuck, they would call their friend, which is okay, they would cheat, or they would just give up on it.
Student scores have shot up this year, leading teachers to believe this is the way of the future.
It's going to happen. I think it's a matter of time. This is going to take off.
Kids can watch lectures on their iPods, cell phones, and the internet, but since not all kids have access to all those things, teachers can burn their lectures onto DVD, and so far they say that's worked for all the students at the high school. Don?
And we didn't even have DVDs when I was in high school. Rosie, thanks very much.
You know, our students saw one standard deviation improvement in our test scores. We didn't realize it was going to change the world. I then had an opportunity to travel to move. My family moved from the Colorado mountains to Illinois, and I worked as a director of technology for this school. But while I was there, our first book came out, Flip Your Classroom, which is the updated version, is down in the bookstore. And Flip Your Classroom, we had no idea what would happen with that. It was translated into 13 languages, and I don't know how many copies, many, hundreds of thousands of copies all over the world. Maybe some of you have read the book. And we then had an opportunity, Aaron and I, to do a lot of work. And I was encouraged then at that point to say, maybe, John, you should like go on the road and be like George Couros and like travel the world and be the guy, right? And so I did. So for 7 years, I traveled all over the world and had a chance to speak everywhere you can imagine, all over the world. You can see pictures of me in different places, Spain and India. That was a cool trip. Argentina. We did flipped class conferences in New Zealand and Australia and Taiwan and UK, many places. This is the first flipped university in the world in Istanbul, Australia. You can see I did a simulcast with 25,000 people at one point, and one book turned into 12 books. In my most recent book, the Mastery Learning Handbook. So I kept writing and doing lots of work. And then in 2019, I went to a conference not dissimilar to this conference in Florida, and I was having dinner with these guys right here in this image. And I began to say, what's next? I'm feeling like the message I'm sharing as I walk around the world is getting stale, and I feel like there's something else. And so my wife and I went on a retreat to Sedona, Arizona, and we asked ourselves, what's next? And by the way, when you live in Chicago and in the winter in February, you go to Sedona, Arizona, that's a good thing because it was so cold. Oh my gosh. And so we went to Sedona, and I realized that I felt that I needed to, the subtitle of our first book is Reach Every Student in Every Class Every Day. And I realized that I had lost track of my time with students, and I felt the pull back to the classroom. And so I thought of all the schools that I've had a chance to go and consult with across the world, where would I want to teach? And one of the schools was this school here. And I thought of what a mission I felt when I visited there. This is me doing PD for this school, which eventually led to me getting a job at that school. So this is my 7th year back, and I started in 2019. So I went through the pandemic like all of you teaching. And so, yeah, I'm back teaching. I'm old. Okay, I think I'm the second oldest teacher at our school. This is my 40th year in education, and have many years in the classroom. So let's go back to my failure. All right, so I got my worst reviews. So context, I teach now, I've taught lots of different science subjects, but right now I teach physics and I teach geology. And in my geology class, this is what I did. I said, I found this cool AI tool, and the students have to interact with some difficult concepts like when you're looking at volcanoes, okay, where we studied, one of our topics is volcanoes. It turns out that the consistency of lava makes all the difference in terms of how a volcano will explode or it will ooze out. It will just spread its lava. Mount St. Helens, think of that big boom. Kilauea in Hawaii, it oozes out. So that's a topic that we would talk about. And so I said, all right, I want the students to answer these questions, and they're going to use this cool AI tool, and the AI tool is going to assess their answers. And what I saw my students do it, I want them to do it in class. They had a flipped classroom. They were watching this cool video, all this kind of stuff. And then they would say, I'll just do it at home. I said, okay. Well, this is 2 years ago, and what they started to do is they went home and then they just AI'd the answers, and they used AI to answer the AI questions that I'd given. And then they went and took the test and they failed because they didn't really understand anything because they just copied and pasted. And I said, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I'm destroying my kids. And these kids, their scores were terrible. They were mad. I was mad. It was a mess. And then in another situation, I also teach the honors physics class. So some of our very bright students. And I remember watching one of our students, one of our very top students at our school, at least in the STEM stuff. And she was sitting there doing a complex physics problem. And as she was doing this complex physics problem, she opened up ChatGPT. We got, one-to-one laptops. She pulls up her laptop. She does this. Boom, she gets it. And I realized that something was wrong with this because, you see, I knew that that young lady would get it if she would have sat with that struggle for just a few more minutes. And she shortchanged her learning. And I watched this over and over again. And I said, wait a second, what are we doing to our kids? And let's think about this for a moment. So then I became very meta, and it's to think, what's going on in the world of education? What is going on with AI? What do we need to rethink about? And here's some of my thoughts and my story. So what is AI built for? Who built this, right? It's people in this area, right? And it's down the road. Maybe some of you you work for Google or you work for OpenAI or whoever you are, right? And I think AI was not built for education. It was built for businesses to be more efficient, to solve problems. You see, AI was built for the boardroom. It was not built for the classroom. You realize, I mean, you do, you're educators. Efficiency is what AI really helps people with, right? Guess what? Education is not efficient. You don't learn from here to here. It's not a nice smooth curve. You go here and back and there. It's a very inefficient process, and that's okay because students, as they learn, their brains need to grow. They need to build those synapses. We've learned about that already a lot. And so we have an issue, right? Here's a quote from Ted Chiang. Using ChatGPT to complete assignments is like bringing a forklift to the weight room. You will never improve your cognitive fitness that way. Right? The students are quickly reaching to the button. They want to hit the button to do the easy thing. But they have to work out. And if they don't, well, yeah, that's a problem, right? So here's my prediction. It's not awesome. It's not crazy hopeful. I'll give you hope. I will, I promise. Here's what I think is going to happen. We've got two choices. Our students will either become stupefied because they're going to push the button too quickly, or they can use AI in a way that helps them to thrive. They can use it as an engine in a way that's going to help. And a lot of the sessions have been about that engine that's going to help them thrive. And I fear that it's going to go both ways at the same time. So are we going to use AI as a crutch or as an engine? Let's talk about the path of stupefaction. So let me give you the bad news first. What is that path of stupefaction? This is not a quote from me, but I think option number one is that AI will downgrade human intelligence. It will stupefy our students and our society. And dadgummit, I'm getting old. Okay, it's not going to be too long. I'm going to the old folks home, and I want a smart kid who's going to be my doctor to make sure that, I last longer, right? So that's option one. And as I was going through this process, somebody invited me to write an article, and this is probably where the confusion was about the book. And I wrote an article that went viral on the internet. It says, AI will stupefy our students unless we do these 6 things. And I made a lot of the points that I'm talking about right now. I've changed my mind about what those 6 things are, by the way, and I'll share my latest thoughts on that in just a minute. You've got the handout, by the way, that has a lot of that information that you're going to take. Yeah, my encouragement is that you take notes in there. Even some of that handout has changed as of the last few days. Somebody challenged me on something, and I changed up quite a bit. So yeah, anyways. Here's some studies. So we've all talked about John Hattie. I've heard John Hattie quoted many times, but in 2023, they made the comment in this big article that he wrote, or Hamilton, Arendt, and Hattie, they said the risk and reality of mass downgrading of human skills and abilities. She says that is a question that he thinks that could happen, that AI could decrease cognitive function. And then in the same article, I think this is maybe the scariest graph I've seen. In this article, he talks about if you take an expert and you give them AI, you 5x their work. It amplifies their work. But if you take a novice and you give them AI, it degrades their work. Guys, I got news. We aren't teaching experts. We're teaching novices. Even my smartest students, my top STEM students, this first time they've taken physics, they're novice. So how are we going to help our novices to use AI responsibly? All right? Another study, Michael Gerlich said this. The findings of his study, I don't know, 600 people or something in his study, he says, revealed a significant negative correlation between frequent AI tool usage and critical thinking abilities. Ouch. So, and he says, and the younger the participants, the worse it was. So we do not want to stupefy our students, do we? Or just recently, there was a whole session on this particular paper. It's like a 112-page paper, came out in January, just like last month. And they said, ultimately, we find at this point in the trajectory, the risks of utilizing AI overshadow the benefits. They talk, here's the positives, here's the negative, and they say, our conclusion is we shouldn't use it. I'm not sure I'm there yet, but I think it's a stark reality that we have to be cognizant of. Let's admit it, school is broken in so many ways, and AI is part of that breakage. And there's so many other things going on. So many people have talked about it at this conference, so many other things about mental health decline, all the issues, students are taking risks, all these things that are happening to Gen Alpha that we want to help them with. And here's something I've been saying to a lot of teachers, and I'll tell you right now. The days of you sending home cognitively complex stuff is over. So in many ways, we started the flipped classroom because we were sending home cognitively complex stuff and they couldn't do it. And they didn't have help. Now we send it home and they just push the button. And when they push the button, I was talking to one of our English teachers and I said, do you ever assign essays anymore to them to write at home? She said, I can't because they're going to push the button. They're just going to let AI do it. Said, yeah. So, and it breaks my heart a little bit. You know, I'm an author. I love writing. And I think it's such an important skill for us to learn. I mean, she's still teaching them writing. But she's teaching them writing, and a lot of the writing, though, has to happen in the classroom, right? So I want to talk about something. I'm going to deviate for a second, but I got triggered yesterday morning. Dr. Eagleman, Stanford professor, first guy, if you remember his talk, he made a comment about AI companion apps where he said he thinks that they might be good for kids. They'll be a sandbox for dating. I remember that? Okay. I'm going to call him out and say he is dead wrong. Okay? These companion apps are evil, and they will cause human suffering. They are already causing human suffering. I know my students, and if they get involved in this, it will be disastrous for their lives. So, and anybody who's involved in that industry, okay, who live here in this city, I know there are companies, and they are housed in this city. They are purporting evil onto our kids, and that should be stopped. Sorry, I had to say that. So, thanks. So what I want to get back to, all right, back to my thing. I just had to address that. I couldn't let that slide. So I think the key thing is we have, whatever we do, we have to design it so that productive struggle is a feature of education. You see, students need to go through that struggle. If you want to get stronger, and this is a metaphor I use with my students, it really works with them, by the way. I've got a lot of students, they're athletes. I'll say, how do you get better at whatever sport, soccer or football, basketball? Well, I practice or I go to the weight room. I said, yeah. So what does that mean? You need to give yourself pressure, friction. That productive struggle is what will make you stronger. And that's not just true in the weight room, that's also true in the classroom. That's true cognitively. So we have to make sure whatever we do, we preserve that productive struggle. So how do we do this? How do we prevent the stupefaction of our kids? How do we preserve that productive struggle, that friction, so that they will learn, so they don't reach for the magic button? So this is Aaron and I, flipped classroom, and I want to just give you just a 30-second thing about flipped classrooms. I think we need a revitalization of flipped learning for these reasons. Because what can you send home as homework now? Think about it. I can't send home cognitively complex stuff. What can I send home? Guess what? You can send home a cheesy video of you teaching a topic, right? And so the flipped classroom, you know, the idea, at least initially, was that the students would go home and watch a cheesy video of John and Aaron teaching them chemistry, and then they would come home and they would do the assignment in class. And we could talk all day long about they wouldn't watch it. Trust me, you can make that happen. It's about implementation. And so the three pictures I think that make the most sense. Why did flipped learning, why did it work? John Hattie, by the way, said that it works in one of his meta things. And if you had been in my classroom those first 19 years, even that year that like I won the big cool award at Washington, D.C., I spent most of my class time at the bottom of Bloom's taxonomy. I was just doing the teacher thing, teaching about chemical reactions and whatever, right? And then when Aaron and I flipped our class, what we did is we flipped up Bloom's taxonomy, and I spent more time at the top of Bloom's taxonomy because they had gotten introduced to the content at home. And actually, I think the ideal shape of this is a diamond where I spend the bulk of my class time. So if you walk into my classroom, you're welcome to visit, by the way. Come on in. Houston, Texas. It's in the winter. It's awesome. We spend the bulk of our class time in the middle of Bloom's taxonomy. And you might say, well, maybe they're going to use AI to learn the content. I don't care. They want to watch a cheesy video of John Bergmann doing his thing with physics or whatever, they can. And if they want to learn it from AI, that's fine. You see, you're putting, the idea of flipped has always been, you want to do the easy stuff outside of class and the hard stuff in the class. In the flipped learning world, we call this the two spaces of flipped learning, the independent space where they do this stuff at home. And there are also models of flipped learning, by the way, that it's called the in-class flip, where they're going to get that content directly in the classroom. It shortens it, it's more efficient. And then they have the group space, and the group space is an awesome thing too. So independent space, they're going to watch the lecture at home, so to speak. Again, you might not believe me that they won't do it, but I can show you the data that my students, they watch the videos. They actually do, okay? And then we have the group space, and the group space is about active learning. It's a much more useful thing. And so I have been in my cave now for, I would say, the last 3 months, trying to figure out how this works. And what I'm talking to you about now is, you're the like first people to hear this. I've really been deeply thinking about what this should look like. And I've come up with what I'm going to call a new paradigm. I'm going to call the Mastery Flip. And the Mastery Flip has 3 key elements. The first one is AI engines. There's AI piece. This is the flipping again. The second one is the analog roots. And the third one is the human checks. I'm going to briefly talk about these and then I'll show you what it looks like. Okay. Number one, that's the Mastery Flip. AI did a really cool image. I thought it was nice that designed it. I described it in Gemini has been my friend here. Okay, yeah, I will give you access to, in the end, you can get this entire, like, it's not the presentation, but I've written an article that I haven't published yet, and I will give you a link to that article, after the end of the session. So what's this AI engine? So my vision of what's going to happen is that students, one of the weaknesses has always been, by the way, of flipped classroom, is if a kid's watching a video at home, they can't raise their hand. And they can say, hey, Mr. Bergmann, what about this? Or I can't ask them a question. Like in the middle of it, say, hey, I know this is a particular area that they're going to struggle with. What if I, at this point, stop what I'm doing and ask them a question? So that interactive piece is hard to do when you're just watching a video of the teacher doing the thing. But AI could fix this, right? It could build that interactivity into that independent space. And I'm seeing that this could really make a difference, okay? I'll show you something that I'm pretty excited about, a tool that is just, I've been made aware of lately. The second pillar is analog roots. I have gone way, way back to paper. My classroom does not look very digital. Though my students have laptops, I'm trying to insist more and more that it's a laptop closed day and that they are struggling with their physics problems or their geology projects, and they are doing it on paper. I'm trying to preserve their cognition in my class, and it's working. It totally is working. Going back to more experimentation. It's really more active learning, but active learning in a way that just works. I'm going old school. This is actually one of my geology kids' papers. It's a piece of paper. And they actually turn it in online, but they turn it in with the, but I have already checked it. You might see the little JB there. The JB is my signature. That means I've checked it already. I'll talk about the check in just a minute and what that looks like. And so I'm going back to more textbooks, paper, pencils. The old school is the new school. And more active learning, here are some snippets from my class and then one of my friends in Taiwan. Take a look. So lots of active learning. This is my chemistry class. Yeah. You guys remember that? They love that. Yeah. My friend in Taiwan. So the classroom looks more active, more engaging. Yeah. Cool experiments with light. I think active learning is such a key thing. And that's going to look very different in a history classroom than it will in a language classroom, than it will in a 5th grade classroom. It's going to look very, very different. So active learning. And so the third pillar, and this maybe is the big idea, is what I'm calling Mastery Vivas or mastery checks. So the word viva is Latin for voice. And so it means I want to hear their voice. That means that I want to have these 2-minute, 3-minute, high-impact conversations with our students. You know, our students have a hard time talking to adults, but I'm forcing my students to talk to adults, okay? So my students right now, this weekend, okay, my physics students, this weekend, they are in the process of making a trebuchet. So in 2 weeks, they have to launch their trebuchet. Do you know what a trebuchet is? A trebuchet is an ancient siege engine, kind of like a catapult, but better. And so they're going to be 5 foot tall. They have to be the max height is 5 feet. And then we're going to go to the football field. We're going to launch tennis balls across the field. And it's cool. They have to like design it. They got to figure it out. They've been all watching YouTube videos on how to build these things. They're literally, I talked to them this week and they said, all right, yeah, I'm working on the build thing. But then the second part is they have to write a paper about explaining the physics behind it. But I know my students, I don't know if your students are like mine, but they're probably going to just use AI to write the physics of it. But you know how I'm going to hack that? 35% of the grade is build. 35% of the grade is, actually, no, it's like 40. I don't know. A high percentage of it is that they have to defend their project to me as an interview. So I'm going to meet with each student, not each group. They're building this in groups. They're going to have to then have a verbal test. And I have created, by the way, in our little AI tool, I'll share about it a little more, I've created the Mean Mr. Bergmann AI interview AI bot. And so what they're going to do is that they can practice with the mean, I call it the mean one, but just going to ask them really hard questions, and then they have to respond. They can verbally respond. They can push the button to record their voice, and they can then practice using the AI. The AI is their tutor to prepare them for the oral exam. So this mastery check is super powerful. And I'm going to do that. That's a big summative assessment because it's a culminating subject thing we're doing just in a couple of weeks. If you want to come, I don't know, it's a couple of weeks from now. And it's a return of the oral exam. And, you know, Eagleman, I was upset at him earlier, right? But Eagleman the other morning, he talked about debates. I totally agreed with him. Some way, you can't fake a conversation, whether it's a debate or a little oral exam with your teacher. It's like, you know, it's like bringing the old school back to the old school is now the new school. That's all right, because Socrates and Plato, how did they test people? It was all oral. They couldn't do tests on paper because paper was too expensive, right? So I think you can do it informative and summative. It's a structured, these Mastery Vivas are these structured, high frequency oral exams. I do them every day with my students. And I'll show an example of that in a little bit. So I still believe, by the way, and I'm going to be weird. I know that at a tech conference, you're supposed to be totally anti-old school tests. I'm not. My students still take traditional tests. You know, I still think multiple choice isn't a bad thing. If you write a good multiple choice question, it really gets at cognition. I'm not against it at all. So let's now talk about the AI engines. I want to go back to that pillar 1. And it is sort of my hope that as I explain this, and this, if you look in the packet, I've got these AI engines. And by the way, the ones you see there are a little different than what I'm about to present. So I've done some thinking. Sarah Cordial, whoever you are, she's in the session. She wrote an email. I shared with her kind of my first thoughts on this. And she said, push back on this. And then I began to think even more deeply, and I rewrote these a little bit. And so let me explain what this is. This is what I'm asking. So we're here in San Francisco. Silicon Valley is just down the road. If you work in AI, this is what we need as teachers. This is what I believe we need. So here's what I'm thinking. We need an AI engine that preserves cognition. And so this is what I want. Okay. So I think there was 3 stages. Stage number 1, this is what I want in an AI tool. And Maybe I can build it myself with vibe coding. I've been watching these things like, maybe I should just try it myself. I don't know. So here's what I want coded into the AI system so that we make AI not a efficiency tool for business, a large language model, but it's a language model that works in our classrooms. That's what I want, right? So first of all, I want it to be a tuned coach. I don't think I had that term on there. So a tuned coach. So in the tuned coach, this is where the AI is trained for the teacher. It might literally have their voice. So we record this, I record my voice or something like that, it captures my voice, and when the student talks to the AI, it comes with my voice. But I want it more than that. I want it tuned to my philosophy of education or the way I teach something. So any chemistry teachers in there, in the room, anybody? So chemistry teachers, you know this. There are several ways to teach chemistry. Teachers, you know this. There are several ways to teach chemistry. For example, there are some people who believe in dimensional analysis when you're doing mathematical part of chemistry, and some who would be more formulaic, right? All right. What if the AI knew that, hey, that's kind of like the two camps for how we would teach chemistry, and we say, which camp are you in? And I would say, by the way, dimensional analysis. And then it would know that it's going to give answers in that philosophy. And so you could tune the AI tutor for your kids based on you and the way you teach. This is allowing you, the teacher, to have control over the AI. I want a tuned coach. So these are like the underlying assumptions I want in the AI. Number two, I want it to build longitudinal mastery. I want it to know that these students struggle with this. So if we could capture what they've been doing for 12 years, whatever, I can see where their gaps are. AI is very good at identifying these gaps, but it'd be awesome if we knew what those are. So often when a student comes to me as a junior or a senior in high school, the gap is down here, and I don't know what that is, and I've got to fill that gap in. And AI should be very good at this. But I don't want to have 38 tools to try and figure all this out. We need this in a tool, right? That's what we need. So the third one, it needs to be engineered for productive struggle. I don't want it to give the answer. I want it to know what we know about the brain, that a student needs to go through that productive struggle. So these are like the base assumptions of this AI engine that I think we need, these three things. And then as we move then to stage two, the at-home piece, in the at-home piece, what I really want is I want them to be able to interact, not just with video, but just be reading. I want them to interact with that. So I'm calling this the content wrapper, all right? So these are like wrappers, things that sit on top of the AI, if you will. So I want the video to pause at key points and ask a question. I want to, if they understand it, then it moves on, and if they don't, they don't. And it'd be awesome if it could sound like your voice as the teacher. And I want then the report. So once the student has watched this video, I've got a robust report that comes back that says, well, they understood this and not this. And I can't believe they can't figure this out, right? And then here's some other features. It's going to identify the hard parts and ask the questions. Like I already said that. Tailored questions based on the student's specific history. It engrades in Socratic struggle. It's hard-coded to the science of learning that we've been talking about at this conference. And it's going to prepare them ultimately for the Mastery Viva, right? So, and then stage three. Now, remember I said I'm going back to more paper, but here's what I really want in my classroom is I still want two more things in the class that AI can do. I'm calling it, this new one, it's not on the paper, I've changed the name of it. This is the unstuck wrapper, that's what I'm gonna call it. So a student works on their analog work and they get stuck. Now, ideally they raise their hand and you walk over and you help them, but maybe you've got 30 kids. Or I recently spoke in the Philippines on a Zoom call, and I've interacted with one particular guy afterwards. He says, I got 60 kids in my class. You can't get to 60 kids in a class. So now the AI could possibly help. And here's what I want them to do. I have done this much work on my piece of paper. I hold it up to some camera, and then it says, oh, I see you've done this work. Let me help you. So but they've got to prove their work, their cognitive work first, and now AI can jump in and help them, the unstruck wrapper. That's what I want it to tutor. And again, it's doing it in the voice of the teacher, with the philosophy of the teacher, all this kind of stuff. And then built into that would also be what I'm calling the translator wrapper. And the translator wrapper, maybe a student is really into skateboarding. If they're into skateboarding, it's physics, then explain it in context of skateboards. Wouldn't that be awesome? But it knows that, right? Somehow that information has become known in the student. Now, I'm talking about all this stuff, and I'm also realizing, cognizant of the fact that we've got to be super careful. I mean, we can't give the data of our kids away, and so there's got to be total like lockdowns and who owns the data. All that stuff has to happen, okay? That sort of has to happen, right? So those are my wrappers. Okay? And so what does a day in the life of this mastery flip classroom look like? Here's my vision. Leo goes home. He's watching a cheesy video that John made. And he gets stuck and it asks questions. And that data then gets fed back to me. That's the pre-work. Okay? And then he comes to class and he does the work in class. Sometimes he raises his hand and he asks a question. And sometimes he needs help and he goes to the unstuck wrapper and he gets the help he needs. And then when he's done with that, he says, I am ready to be tested. And so he comes to me, or the teacher, and we have the Mastery Viva, we have the conversation, and in the conversation, we say, huh. And I say, have you thought about it this way? What about that way? So that's the idea. We've got these 3 levels on how that works. Now you say, John, that's a great idea. This tool doesn't exist. I can't make this work now. How do I do this tomorrow? Like many of you, I'll be back in the classroom on Tuesday. I got Monday off. That's kind of cool, right? So I'll be back in the classroom with kids in front of me on Tuesday. How do you make it work today? Now, I'm going to show you some tools that I'm using now that have been helpful, but note that I'm using lots of tools. We don't have like the one tool to rule them all here, which I want. So any of you guys, yeah, Google people, you here in the room, I'm telling you what we need. But I'm going to show you some things, a couple that'll blow your mind. So in my geology class, one thing I wanted to do is this. So the kids are watching a video, and I want to build an interactivity, right? And so our school has purchased a tool called flintk12.com. Anybody a Flint K12 user? Quite a few. Okay, so we've got Flint K12. It's a really cool tool. It's an AI tool that is kind of like a wrapper, honestly. And it has some of the features of the things I talked about. And so here's what I'm doing. The students have watched a video the night before, and the first thing I do is I have a cheesy question of the day, and they really love that, by the way. Like, who is the best basketball player ever? And then they fight about it. It's so fun. So I build a relationship. But after that, I'll say, all right, everybody pull out your laptop. So this is the point where they do open their laptops and ask the laptop a question. They go to flintk12.com, and then I have trained the flintk12.com based on the level of the content, the video that they watched, and the textbook section that's associated with it. I said, let them ask you a question. And I want you actually to answer the question. Flint is, by the way, hardwired to not answer the question, but I said, please answer the first question, but take them deeper. And this is a 6-minute warm-up activity. And I get the data. So here is the kids. This is a class from February 5th, just a few days ago, right? And their names are all grayed out. You can see that. And so they ask a question, and then it gives them an answer, and then it takes them deeper. And you can see it takes them, I've limited it to a 6-minute activity, and you can see most of them spent 6 minutes-ish on this exam, or this little activity. And while this is happening, I can see this happening in real time. So I'm watching each kid ask the AI a question. Got it? And so let's take a look at one of those. So here's one student. She said, does the temperature at the bottom of the ocean ever change since it's so far from the sunlight? And it's cold. And is it cold or hot? So that's her question, right? Great question, Camilla, And it answers the question, and then it gives her a secondary question to go deeper. So let's take a look at that. So it gives them 3 options. So answer one of these questions, 1, 2, or 3. So she answers the questions, maybe because the density of the water based on the temperature, I don't really know. Well, there could have been, etc. So there is this dialogue back and forth, and I am watching these conversations in real time. And now I have 7 or 8 minutes where I'm going to say, Camilla, what did you learn today on the AI? And then Dimitri, what did you learn? And there's been times they have asked questions. It's like, I have no idea. You asked a question that, I'm actually a chemist teaching geology. So I'm no geology expert. And so it's been fascinating, the questions that they ask. And the beauty is every kid gets to ask it. And it's awesome. And so this is a way to spark conversation and to get them going. So this is one way that you could use AI in a really positive way, and at least in my flipped context. And this is one that has blown me away. So, I think it was October maybe. One of my Twitter followers said, John, have you checked out this new program called Skylo? And I said, no. And so I'd used it and I thought, it's not ready. And then he challenged me again now in January, and he said, you need to try it again. And so I did. And then, lo and behold, I tried it this morning again, and it is even worlds better than it was. By the way, I shared the article that I'm going to send to you guys in just a little bit. That article with the founder of the company had called me, or he texted me or emailed me, whatever. It said, can we chat? And so I shared the article with him, and I swear he read my mind, or he just read my article, because he did this. So here is a video that I have posted on YouTube. I uploaded it to Skylo. I think I just put a link into it or something like that. I spent a few minutes recording my voice, just a few minutes recording my voice. It then takes over my video and it represents the video in my voice. So it's like muted the actual video, but it's taken the script of it. Yeah, let's watch what happened this morning. I just did this. So there is me teaching, right, about thermal energy to my physics students. But it's also listening to me.
Heat to warm up the inside of your vehicle. So thermal energy shows up in every kind of energy transformation. John, let me ask you, how do you think thermal energy shows up in everyday life?
Asked me a question. It's asking me a question that it didn't do last week. So it's pausing, and somehow it's figured out what a good question is, and I'm going to respond. I was doing this in the hotel room this morning, right?
I get super hot when I exercise.
That's a great example, John. When you exercise, your muscles are using chemical energy, and some of it gets converted into movement. But a lot of it also becomes heat. That's why you feel warmer.
So it's more of a dialogue back and forth with AI, Mr. Bergmann. Now, I've let my students make a choice. That's why, but it's like the old version. The new version is so much better, as of like this morning. And so the students, they've been playing with, I said, you can choose YouTube Mr. Bergmann, the real Mr. Bergmann, or you can choose the AI Mr. Bergmann. And it's right now running about 50-50 with the kids. And some of them are playing with it. It's like, have Mr. Bergmann explain this in Japanese. And it did. And I don't speak Japanese, so I don't know if it was, and my students, they don't speak Japanese either. They were just playing around with it. But it was amazing what it could do already. So a lot of this wrapper, if you will, this content wrapper may already exist. So I think it's totally the idea. This is you create an AIU. Yeah. Isn't that cool? I mean, it's just like, wow, we can do amazing things already. Some of these things are happening. Now let's shift to the Mastery Viva. What does that look like? And how can we do that at scale? So I've actually done these for a long time. These Mastery, these short, high impact conversations. And so here is a Mastery check in my geology class with a couple of my students. I'm just going to highlight two of them, and I recorded them with their permission. And yeah, let's listen to this chat with this young lady, with Bethany. Why does the alluvium cover the valley floor? What is alluvium? Explain alluvium to me.
It's the I forgot.
All right, so she's struggling.
So I just know that it covers. It's like where the water is like set itself on the land. It's not. Well, yeah, because the flood water slows down and deposits the sediment during the repeated flood.
Well, what does the word alluvium mean? It's super.
Yeah.
Don't overthink it. It's a simple word.
Flat.
No. What does the word alluvium mean? So she's stuck on a word, a particular word, the word alluvium. It was a unit on streams and how water flows. So she's now mixing up the word alluvium and the word alluvial fan. Alluvium is something quite different, but they're similar enough. So she's trying to pull it together.
Oh yeah,
right? So it's just another word for sediment. So let's go back and look at this. Why does alluvium cover the valley floor in a floodplain? So we're in a flood. Notice the analog route, right? She's done this work on her paper, but she's still struggling, and I'm trying to get her to that level of cognition that is kind of in my head of where she needs. So she got there, right? So this is my job. I walk around and talk to kids. I tell you, it's the best thing I ever do. I love just sitting around walking to kids. That's same exact question now with Dimitri. So let's listen on Dimitri's conversation.
Erosion happens. The sediment. I mean, the position keeps happening. The sediment moves over, and it goes to the floor plane. Like when deposition happens, it goes to the floor plane first.
But you're almost there. When does it go in the floodplain? When does the sediment, alluvium, go into the floodplain?
When it keeps flooding. Yeah. So when it keeps flooding and then when it just keeps flooding.
What do you think? Now, this isn't on here, but what do you think is a benefit
of alluvium in a floodplain.
The moving of sediment. So like deposition, and then that sediment can like maybe help the ground. Maybe like
How
it
so?
can help the area around it, make fertile soils.
That's exactly right.
Oh, sorry.
And so he got it, right? Because a flood produces these sediments that neutralize the soil. It's a very positive thing. And Dimitri got there, and I was able to push him to that extreme. And so you can do this, right? Like you might say, oh, John, I got such a big class. How can I make this work? And that's my problem too, by the way. And so, oops, why did I have that twice? And so I began to think, how could I make this work? Because sometimes the students will finish kind of their analog routes in class, and they won't have time for the mastery check. And then oftentimes I've been told they'll come at lunch and they'll do all this stuff, and then it's like, I got to think of a better way. And so I said, well, maybe I could hack the Flint thing. And so I did. And so with this cool Flint K-12 thing, I said, I want you to take over and do the Mastery Viva Flint. I fed it all the information, and the students have just started this in the last week. So this is all brand new, but I pulled one up from the hotel this morning, and here's a little conversation. And by the way, I've set this so they can only say it out loud, like record it. They can't type. Because I don't know if your students are like mine, but they might just like copy and paste from AI. They potentially could read this. So here's a student, and it asked a question: what are the three major features of passive continental margin? And then this is the response. I could click on listen, and I could listen to this young lady. This is Janelle, and Janelle then responded this way. And then the AI then gets back, and it says, excellent start. You've clearly identified the three features. And then it takes her deeper. And then she had to respond. She pushed record and with her voice. And it's so this is possible. Again, I'm using different tools. It's not like one full learning OS system that I believe that would be the ideal thing for the average teacher. But these types of things actually exist. There is a way to do these things even now with the tools that we have available. So, guys, we have work to do. And this, I've got the QR code. I'll put it up in a minute too. But this is where, if you want the article, go to the link, and you'll get the article and some other features. And I've got a bunch of videos too that I'll send you over the next few days if that's something that's interesting to you. So, as we close out, I believe we are at a critical juncture in this world of education. I don't know if you guys know who Dan Fitzpatrick is, but Dan Fitzpatrick, the AI educator, he's Irish. He travels all over the world talking about AI and education. He's written some books, and he said something that was very haunting to me. I didn't talk to him, but he wrote this recently, and this is what he said. He said, the next 5 years will determine the next 50. I thought, yeah, that really resonates with me as I think about where we're headed in the world of education. AI was not built for kids. There really is a danger of critical thinking loss. We are teaching novices. It could go one way, guys. But if we're going to help our students soar and thrive, then I think we need to make the old school Socrates, Socratic thinking, you heard that from lots of presenters this weekend, the new school, but yet still teach our kids how to use AI. I've got articles that I've written to kids about how they should think about AI. I had a chance to go to New York City. I was invited to go work with a bunch of mostly university professors. They were STEM professors, a STEM thing. We met at the Rockefeller Center. It was really cool. And we came up with a letter to our students about AI. And what do we recommend? So we wrote this jointly as a team of, there's 12 of us or something like that there. And we wrote this paper as a sort of a manifesto to our students about AI and how it could be helpful for them. And we said, you're in the most exciting generation. This is like an electricity event. I'm not the first person stealing this from some of the AI thinkers, that we are in the age where this is as big as electricity. We can't imagine a world with electricity. And it's going to change. But the problem is that when you have an industrial revolution level event, then it changes everything. We don't know what jobs are going to exist. We don't know what jobs are going to cease to exist. And so we need to prepare our kids for that. And the problem is there'll be winners and there'll be losers in this game. And I want my students to be the ones who win. Because again, we are on a knife's edge, and our students could go to the path of stupefaction, or our students can go to the soaring place. And it is my goal, it is my hope that my students will thrive. It's my goal and my hope that your students will thrive. And we need to make this happen. We want to preserve the aha moments. We want to not let that go to waste. So let me tell you about Samuel. So Samuel took my GMO, my geology class. We call it GMO. My geology class last year. And can I say this? It's kind of, the kids who don't take physics take geology. And I lovingly called them last year my Rocks for Jocks class. Samuel is about 6'4", 260. And he came to me at the end of the year, actually about this time they were signing up, probably another couple of weeks a year ago, and he said, at the end of the year, actually about this time they were signing up, probably another couple of weeks a year ago, and he said, Mr. Bergmann, I want to take honors physics. And I said, okay, you sure? Samuel, and I said, you willing to put, it's going to be a lot of work? And he said, I'm in. And I think it was honestly, as I reflect, it was because we really had a really good rapport and a relationship. In fact, Samuel, large Samuel, he's actually got offers to play football at the next level in college. And I do weird stuff like I create nicknames for kids. I got one kid I call CP, college prep. We're a college prep high school, so I call him college prep. And then, but Samuel, I call him TS, which stands for Tiny Samuel. So, and he's not tiny at all. So, and so Samuel and I, you know, he took honors physics this year. And you know what? He struggled. It's been really hard for Samuel. And but he stuck with it. I worked with him so much. And Wednesday, just a few days ago, he's taken a test. So, first of all, Mastery Learning, you can pick up the book, the Mastery Learning Handbook. I don't care when a student learns it, I care that they learn it. And so the kids can take retests. So he took the Unit 4 test a week ago or whatever it was, and he didn't do so well. And he was taking his second attempt on Wednesday. And I'm watching him take the test. And they do it on a laptop. Okay, so the questions are on a laptop. I've got a whole system where when they take a test, they get a different test each time. It randomizes numbers. It's on a lockdown browser, so they can't, use the internet. They got a piece of paper and a calculator, and they're doing the physics thing. And I'm watching Samuel do it. And then he pushes submit. And his whole face changes. I think, oh no, he's failed again. And he came up to me. He was almost in tears. And Samuel said, I got 100. He got 100. He has not got 100 yet until Wednesday. So you see, and then he made this statement. He said, Mr. Bergmann, I studied so hard. I basically went into my cave. He didn't say it that way. And I was just doing these problems that I was practicing, and it paid off. You see, Samuel did not push the button. He went through the productive struggle, and that aha moment was preserved. Don't we want more of those moments? How are we going to design our classrooms in a way where the struggle is preserved? Do I have a picture of Samuel? I think I do, don't I? Oh, yeah, here's Samuel. There he is. Yeah, I'm supposed to have a picture of him up there. Whatever we do, we have to preserve that productive struggle. We've got to preserve the aha moments. We can't let our students push the button. We need to rethink how we do education. And I propose to you that we have AI engines, that we go back to the analog roots, and then we have these high-impact Mastery Vivas with our students. Thank you very much.